The vast vacuum of space had never felt so oppressive to Captain Avery Park. As the shuttle approached the gleaming orbital platform of Iraq Prime, the full weight of his assignment settled on his shoulders. Not just any assignment, but one that would mark humanity's first significant foray into galactic politics as more than just another species. "Token human," he muttered under his breath, watching the iridescent spires of the trading hub grow larger through the viewport. The term had been used during his briefing, albeit with diplomatic sugarcoating. The Arab Democratic Coalition, the ADC, was expanding its influence and needed cultural ambassadors from various species. Humans were the newest addition to this interstellar United Nations, and Avery was their flag bearer. "Captain Park, we're beginning docking procedures," announced the pilot, a blue-skinned Moralian whose six-fingered hands danced across the holographic controls. "ADC representatives await your arrival in Docking Bay 17. Avery straightened his uniform, the deep navy of Earth's Space Corps, with the new ADC insignia prominently displayed on his shoulder. The year 2387 marked humanity's 25th year of interstellar travel, but only their third in formal relations with the ADC. Compared to the millennia-old civilizations he would be working alongside, humans were infants playing at the adults' table. "Understood," he replied, tucking away his personal tablet. "Any last-minute updates on the Jalori situation?" The pilot's eye stalks swiveled toward him. "The ceasefire agreement was signed 6 standard hours ago. That's why this mission is proceeding at all. The Jalori Federation has agreed to permit an ADC presence on Jular 9. Iraq Prime loomed before them now, a metropolis suspended in space. The station served as the primary commercial and diplomatic hub for 12 species, with architecture that somehow accommodated the needs of beings ranging from methane-breathing giants to gravity-sensitive avians. The cacophony of cultures was both dizzying and exhilarating. After docking, Avery was escorted through corridors teeming with life forms. Some recognized the human uniform and nodded respectfully. Others regarded him with barely concealed curiosity or suspicion. Ambassador Kelmore, a towering Iraqian with silver-flecked skin, greeted him at the diplomatic quarter entrance. "Captain Park, your punctuality is appreciated. The Council is eager to proceed with the briefing." Avery followed the ambassador into a chamber where representatives from various ADC member species sat around a circular table. Holograms flickered with data on the Jalori Federation, a militaristic society that had only recently ceased hostilities with the ADC after a decade of border skirmishes. "Captain," began the eldest Iraqian, Director Safina, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. "Your mission parameters have been finalized. While publicly, you are establishing an embassy on Jular 9 to foster diplomatic relations. Your true objective is more delicate." Avery's spine straightened. "I'm listening, Director." "The ceasefire is fragile. The Jalori military leadership remains divided on whether cooperation with the ADC serves their interests. You will establish a permanent embassy on Jular 9, but more importantly, you will assess which Jalori factions truly desire peace and which are merely biding their time." A data projection materialized before Avery, displaying the storm-racked surface of Jular 9. Electromagnetic tempests swept across vast plains, while jagged mountain ranges cut through the landscape like wounds. "The planet experiences perpetual electromagnetic storms," explained a reptilian scientist. "Communication will be unreliable at best. You'll have a small contingent of ADC personnel, but for security reasons, they will not be informed of your intelligence-gathering mission." Avery studied the planet's violent atmosphere. "And the Jalori have agreed to this embassy's location? It seems challenging." Director Safina's expression tightened. "The location was their suggestion. I believe it is a test, one they expect us to fail. They doubt our commitment, especially when represented by..." She hesitated. A human, Avery finished flatly. Indeed. The Julori value strength and resilience. They view humanity as unproven. Her compound eyes focused intently on him. Several Julori generals have expressed skepticism about your species' true talents. Avery nodded, understanding the subtext. He wasn't just representing the ADC. He was representing his entire species, proving their worth to a galactic community that had watched Earth from afar for centuries before making contact. When do I depart? He asked. Tomorrow. Your team has been assembled. A communications specialist, a cultural liaison, and a security detail. Lieutenant Mira Solis will serve as your intelligence officer. The director gestured to a slight woman with feathered hair who had been quietly observing from the corner. The avian species she belonged to were known for their keen senses and ability to perceive energy fluctuations, ideal for surveillance. Lieutenant, Avery acknowledged with a nod. Captain Park, she responded, her voice melodic but controlled. I look forward to working together again. Avery raised an eyebrow. They had crossed paths during a joint operation near Alpha Centauri last year, a tense extraction of researchers from a facility under attack. Her cool competence had impressed him then. Also, joining you will be Kylar Threx, continued the director, indicating a figure that appeared more mechanical than organic. Our best data analyst and electromagnetic field specialist. The biodroid inclined his head, optical sensors whirring as they focused on Avery. Captain, my systems are optimized for Jeweler 9's electromagnetic interference patterns. The briefing continued for another hour, detailing diplomatic protocols, emergency procedures, and intelligence targets. As the meeting concluded, Avery realized the enormity of what lay ahead, not just a diplomatic mission, but potentially the defining moment for humanity's place among the stars. Later, in his temporary quarters, Avery reviewed the dossiers on the Julori leadership. The species evolved in a high-gravity environment with constant electrical storms, developing thick carapaces that could withstand both physical and electrical trauma. Their society valued practicality, discipline, and technological progress, particularly military applications. A knock at his door interrupted his studies. Lieutenant Solis entered, her movements graceful despite the station's artificial gravity. Briefing materials don't tell the whole story, she said without preamble, taking a seat across from him. The Julori aren't just skeptical of humans. They're actively looking for reasons to terminate the agreement. Avery closed the holographic display. You have sources? I still maintain connections from the Alpha Centauri operation. The Julori see this mission as a joke, the ADC sending their weakest species to a hostile environment. Her eyes, with their distinctive avian pupils, fixed on him. They've arranged a series of diplomatic challenges that will test your physical and mental capabilities. Challenges I'm meant to fail, Avery concluded. Precisely. And there's more. Elements within the ADC may not want this mission to succeed either. There are factions who believe humanity was admitted to the coalition too quickly. Avery leaned back, processing this information. So I'm caught between Julori who want to prove humans are weak, and ADC members who want to prove we're unreliable. Mira's feathers ruffled slightly, an indication of concern among her kind. Watch for a Colonel Velker among the Julori. He leads their moderate faction and could be a valuable ally. Conversely, Lieutenant Colonel Korthax Velvori represents the Old Guard, militaristic, xenophobic, and influential. Thank you, Lieutenant. I appreciate the unofficial briefing. After she departed, Avery turned to the viewport, gazing at the tapestry of stars beyond Aurak Prime. Tomorrow, he would journey to a storm-racked planet to establish an embassy nobody wanted, surrounded by allies who might be enemies, and enemies who might become allies. And somehow, he had to prove that humans belonged among the stars. The descent to Jeweler 9 was as turbulent as the briefing had promised. Their shuttle bucked and shuddered as it pierced the planet's ionosphere. Electrical discharges crawling across the viewport like luminescent spiders. "Hull integrity at 87%, reported Kylar Threx, his mechanical components vibrating with the ship's motion. Electromagnetic interference increasing exponentially. In the pilot's seat, Avery gripped the manual controls, a precaution against the automation failures common in Jeweler 9's atmosphere. The ADC diplomatic team strapped behind him remained stoically silent, though the tension was palpable. "Lieutenant Solis, any response to our landing request?" Avery called over his shoulder. Mira adjusted her communications array, feathered fingers dancing across the console. "Sporadic. I'm receiving fragmented approval from Julori Command, but the signal keeps dropping." A massive lightning bolt struck dangerously close to their port wing, causing the shuttle to lurch sideways. Warning lights flashed across the console. "Main communication array damaged," Kylar announced. "Switching to secondary systems." Avery corrected their trajectory, eyes scanning for the landing coordinates provided by Julori Command. Through gaps in the storm clouds, he glimpsed the embassy site, a prefabricated complex nestled against a cliff face for protection from the worst of the tempests. "There's our welcoming committee," Mira noted, pointing to a formation of armored Julori warriors, standing at attention despite the howling winds and electrical discharges. As they approached the landing zone, another lightning strike hit, this time directly impacting their starboard engine. The shuttle lurched violently, systems blaring with critical warnings. "Brace for rough landing!" Avery shouted, wrestling with the controls as the craft plummeted the final 100 meters. He managed to level their descent enough to hit the landing pad with a bone-jarring impact that sent equipment flying throughout the cabin. Emergency systems activated, suppressing small electrical fires that had erupted from overloaded circuits. "Status report," Avery demanded, unbuckling his harness. "Minor injuries only," reported the security chief, already checking the diplomatic team. "But the shuttle won't be flying again without significant repairs." Kylar's diagnostic systems hummed. Primary and secondary communication arrays destroyed. Life support functional, but compromised. Propulsion systems offline. Avery nodded grimly and moved to the airlock. "Let's not keep our hosts waiting." The moment the outer door slid open, Jeweler 9's environment assaulted them. The air was breathable but charged with electricity that made human hair stand on end. The gravity, 1.3 times Earth standard, immediately made every movement more laborious. Most striking was the constant background rumble of thunder, punctuated by flashes of lightning that turned night into day. The Julori delegation approached, imposing figures nearly 2 meters tall, with segmented exoskeletons in varying shades of bronze and copper. Their forearms ended in clawed hands, while their insectoid heads featured compound eyes that gleamed with intelligence and mandibles that clicked in their native language. One stepped forward, distinguished by elaborate markings on his carapace. "Captain Park, I am Colonel Velker, appointed liaison to the ADC embassy." His voice emerged through a translator device, mechanical but clear. "Your arrival was more dramatic than anticipated." Avery straightened, ignoring the oppressive gravity. "The storms provided an unexpected welcome, Colonel. Nothing we couldn't handle." Velkur's compound eyes studied him, facets reflecting the lightning. "Indeed. Your manual piloting skills are adequate." He gestured to the damaged shuttle. "We will provide repair assistance, though I suspect you'll be planetside longer than planned." Behind Velkur, another Julori officer watched with unmistakable disdain, even without an introduction. Avery recognized Lieutenant Colonel Korthax Velvori from Mira's description, his carapace darker, adorned with battle scars rather than ceremonial markings. "The embassy facilities await your inspection," Velkur continued. "However, a storm front approaches. We must move quickly." No sooner had he spoken than a warning klaxon sounded. In the distance, a wall of darkness advanced across the plains, lightning within it, so frequent it appeared as a continuous glow. "Superstorm," explained Velker, mandibles clicking with urgency. "Your damaged vessel is at risk. We must transfer essential equipment to the embassy immediately." Avery turned to his team. "Priority on medical supplies, communication equipment, and data cores. Leave personal effects." The next 20 minutes became a frantic race against the approaching tempest. Humans and Julori worked side by side, hauling equipment across the landing pad to the embassy compound. The increasing wind made each trip more difficult, while static electricity built up on every metal surface, delivering painful shocks to the unwary. They had nearly completed the evacuation when a blinding flash and deafening crack announced a direct lightning strike on the shuttle. The vessel's remaining systems surged and died, plunging its interior into darkness. "Kyler!" Avery shouted, realizing the biodroid had been retrieving final data components. Without hesitation, Avery sprinted back toward the shuttle, fighting against wind that now threatened to knock him off his feet. Inside, he found Kylar collapsed near the main console, optical sensors flickering weakly. "Captain," the biodroid's voice wavered with static. "Electrical surge. Damaged primary systems. Secondary reboot initiating." Avery hefted the biodroid over his shoulder, staggering under the combined weight and Julor 9's enhanced gravity. As he emerged from the shuttle, another lightning bolt struck barely 20 meters away, the electrical discharge racing across the landing pad toward them. A Julori warrior, not Velker or Korthax, but a younger officer, rushed forward with a grounding rod, planting it between Avery and the approaching electrical current. The discharge diverted to the rod, but not before arcing partially to the Julori's conductive exoskeleton. The warrior collapsed, limbs twitching from electrical overload. Avery, still carrying Kylar, diverted to the fallen Julori. A quick assessment showed the warrior's natural electrical resistance was overwhelmed, his nervous system misfiring. Drawing on emergency medical training, Avery identified the Julori equivalent of a carotid artery and applied pressure in a pattern that helped regulate their species' electrical impulses, a technique he'd studied during xenobiology training, but never performed. The warrior's seizures gradually subsided. By then, other Julori had reached them, including Colonel Velker, who observed Avery's emergency treatment with evident surprise. "Move!" ordered Velker, as another lightning bolt slammed nearby. Together, they carried Kylar and the injured warrior the remaining distance to the embassy, the storm's full fury descending just as the massive doors sealed behind them. Inside, emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the prefabricated structure. The wounded Julori was rushed to their medical facility, while Kylar was placed on a diagnostic platform designed for mechanical repairs. "Your actions were unexpected," Velker said, approaching Avery once the immediate crisis had passed. "Few non-Julori know how to treat electrical shock trauma in our physiology." Avery shrugged, trying to appear casual despite his pounding heart. "Basic xenobiology. All Earth Space Corps officers receive training on allied species emergency care." Velkor's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Nevertheless, Officer Zurek owes you his life. Such a debt is not taken lightly among our kind." From across the room, Avery noticed Korthax watching their exchange, his posture radiating disapproval. "I understand we're supposed to inspect the embassy," Avery said, redirecting the conversation to diplomatic matters. "Though I suspect the storm will delay formal proceedings." "Indeed. This tempest will last approximately 30 hours, based on meteorological patterns. Perhaps you would use this time to rest and recover from your journey." Velker gestured to a corridor. "Your quarters have been prepared according to ADC specifications." The embassy, despite its prefabricated nature, was impressively equipped. Reinforced walls and energy shields provided protection against the constant storms. while interior spaces accommodated both human and Julori physiological needs. The structure had been anchored to bedrock, with a nearby cliff face providing additional shelter. Avery met with his team in a secure conference room, running preliminary scans for surveillance devices before speaking freely. "Assessment?" he asked, looking at each member in turn. Mira spoke first. Her feathers slightly puffed, a sign of agitation among her kind. "Communications are completely severed. The storm destroyed both our arrays and is interfering with any backup systems. We're isolated until repairs can be made or the worst passes." "That timing seems convenient," noted the security chief, a veteran human officer named Haynes. Kyler, partially recovered but still showing signs of damage, projected a holographic display of the landing. "Analysis suggests the lightning strike on our vessel was not random. There was a 78% deviation from natural electrical discharge patterns." "You're saying someone directed that lightning bolt?" Avery asked, incredulous. "Not precisely," Kyler clarified. "But something influenced the storm's behavior. Jeweler 9's atmospheric conditions are chaotic, but follow certain underlying patterns. This did not." Avery processed this information. "So either the Julori have technology that can influence these storms, or there's something about this planet we weren't told." "Both possibilities are concerning," Mira noted. "But there's something else. The officer you saved, Zurek. He's part of Colonel Velker's personal guard. His presence on the landing pad wasn't on the official security roster." "Meaning what?" "Meaning Velker sent him specifically to observe us, outside normal protocols." Mira's eyes narrowed. "That suggests Velker has his own agenda, separate from official Julori policy." Their discussion was interrupted by a communication request from the Julori Command Center. Avery accepted, and Colonel Velker's image appeared on the main display. "Captain Park, I hope your accommodations are satisfactory." The Julori officer began formally. "They are, Colonel. Your preparations are appreciated." "Excellent. Once the storm abates, Lieutenant Colonel Korthax has proposed a tour of our defensive installations, part of the transparency measures outlined in the ceasefire agreement." Avery detected the subtle emphasis on Korthax's involvement. "We look forward to it." "Additionally," Velker continued, "several of our officers have expressed interest in observing human operational capabilities. Perhaps a joint training exercise could be arranged?" And there it was, the first of the challenges Mira had warned about. "A reasonable request," Avery replied smoothly. "My team would welcome the opportunity for cultural exchange through shared training practices." After the communication ended, Mira looked at him skeptically. "They'll design exercises to exploit human physiological weaknesses, our lower strength in this gravity, our vulnerability to electrical discharge." "Undoubtedly," Avery agreed, "which is why we'll need to demonstrate other capabilities." The superstorm raged through the night and into the next day, its fury rattling the embassy's foundations despite their reinforcement. Avery used the time to study everything available about Julori culture, military organization, and the geological characteristics of Jeweler 9 itself. Something about the planet's electromagnetic activity nagged at him, patterns that seemed almost artificial in their consistency. When he mentioned this to Kylar, the biodroid confirmed his suspicions. "The storms follow mathematical patterns that suggest technological influence," Kylar explained, displaying analysis graphs. "Not control, but rather enhancement of natural phenomena." Before they could investigate further, an urgent alert sounded throughout the embassy. Avery rushed to the command center, where Lieutenant Haynes was monitoring emergency systems. "Power fluctuations throughout the complex," Haynes reported. "The storm's intensity has increased beyond predicted levels. Shield generators are overloading." On cue, the lights flickered ominously. A communication channel opened, revealing Colonel Velker's concerned visage. "Captain Park, our meteorological systems predict this storm will exceed safety parameters. Your embassy's power grid cannot withstand the increased electrical activity. What do you suggest, Colonel? Avery asked, already calculating evacuation options. There is a Julori military bunker 3 kilometers east, built into the cliff face. Its power systems are hardened against even the worst tempests. I am dispatching an extraction team. 30 minutes later, Avery and his core team were boarding armored Julori transport vehicles. The journey, though short in distance, proved harrowing. Lightning struck continuously around them, while winds powerful enough to lift small boulders buffeted the transports. They reached the bunker, a fortress of dark metal embedded in solid rock, its entrance protected by energy fields that parted only momentarily to admit the vehicles. Inside, Julori personnel moved with practiced efficiency, directing the ADC team to designated areas. The bunker's interior revealed the Julori aesthetic, functional to the point of austerity, with technology integrated seamlessly into the architecture. Colonel Velker greeted them personally. Welcome to Forward Operating Base Tarkath. These quarters were designed for diplomatic emergencies. He gestured to a section of the bunker, modified with human-compatible facilities. Your safety is assured here. Avery noted the presence of Lieutenant Colonel Korthax and several high-ranking Julori officers, observing their arrival with undisguised scrutiny. Your embassy suffered significant damage, Velker continued. Repairs will commence once the storm subsides, but I estimate your team will need to remain here for at least 7 standard cycles. 7 days in a Julori military installation. Avery recognized both the challenge and the opportunity this presented. Your hospitality is appreciated, Colonel. Perhaps this unexpected arrangement will facilitate the cultural exchange we discussed earlier. Velkur's mandibles clicked in what Avery had come to recognize as amusement. Indeed. Lieutenant Colonel Korthax has already prepared a joint exercise schedule, beginning tomorrow. As the Julori officers departed, Mira moved closer to Avery. This was orchestrated, she whispered. The embassy's shield generators were functioning at optimal capacity before the power fluctuations began. Sabotage? Or deliberate power reduction? Either way, we're now on their territory, playing by their rules. Avery nodded thoughtfully. Then we'll need to change the game. The first joint exercise came the following morning, a combat simulation in the bunker's training arena. The gravity felt even heavier than outside, suggesting the Julori had increased it specifically for this demonstration. Lieutenant Colonel Korthax presided over the event, his scarred carapace gleaming under the harsh lighting. Today's exercise will assess tactical response capabilities in varied combat scenarios, he announced to the assembled Julori officers and ADC personnel. The arena itself was a marvel of adaptive technology. Its floor, walls, and ceiling comprised of modular panels that could reconfigure to create different environments. For the first demonstration, it formed an urban combat setting with multiple levels and limited visibility. Captain Park, Korthax addressed him directly. Perhaps you would honor us by participating in the first simulation? We are curious about human combat methodologies. The challenge was clear, as was the expectation of failure. Avery stepped forward, accepting a training weapon, a Julori shock staff modified for human use. The weapon felt unnaturally heavy in the enhanced gravity. The objective is simple, explained Korthax. Neutralize all opposition forces and secure the central command node. You will face standard Julori training drones. What followed was less a training exercise and more a calculated humiliation. The drones moved with blinding speed, their programming clearly optimized for the enhanced gravity that hampered Avery's movements. The shock staff, while deadly in Julori hands, proved unwieldy for human physiology. After being neutralized 3 times in rapid succession, Avery paused, reassessing his approach. The Julori weapons and tactics were designed for their physiology: 4 arms, exoskeletal protection, natural electrical resistance. Fighting on their terms was a losing proposition. Instead of attempting another frontal assault, Avery began using the environment itself. He lured drones into narrow passages where their size became a disadvantage, used reflective surfaces to confuse their optical sensors, and employed debris as improvised weapons that required less strength to wield effectively. Most significantly, he observed how the drones interfaced with the arena's systems through electromagnetic signals that created distinctive patterns in the air, visible only because of the conductive particles Jeweler 9's atmosphere had deposited on every surface. By tracking these patterns, Avery could predict drone movements seconds before they occurred. It wasn't enough for victory. The scenario was too heavily weighted against him, but his performance improved dramatically. When the exercise concluded, murmurs rippled through the observing Julori. Korthax's mandibles clicked in what might have been disappointment at the less-than-total failure. "An interesting approach," Velker commented, stepping forward. "Most non-Julori never adapt to our combat methodologies." "I wasn't trying to fight like a Julori," Avery replied, catching his breath. "That would be foolish. Humans survive by adaptation, not by overpowering our environment." "An admirable sentiment," interjected Korthax, his translator barely masking his condescension. "Though adaptation without strength seems a precarious evolutionary strategy." "Perhaps," Avery conceded with a diplomatic smile. "Though I noticed your training drones rely heavily on electromagnetic signaling. Effective on Jeweler 9, certainly, but potentially vulnerable to signal disruption in other environments." A tense silence followed this observation. Clearly, Avery had identified a military vulnerability the Julori preferred not to acknowledge. "Quite perceptive," Velker finally responded, breaking the awkward moment. "Which leads conveniently to our next scheduled activity, a tour of our electromagnetic research facilities." The tour proved even more revealing than the combat exercise. The Julori had developed remarkable technologies to harness their planet's electrical storms, energy collectors, signal boosters, and defensive systems that could use atmospheric charge to create barriers or weapons. Most intriguing was their central power distribution system, a masterpiece of engineering that channeled the storm's energy throughout the bunker. However, as Kylar discreetly noted to Avery, the system showed signs of strain. "Their power regulators are operating beyond optimal parameters," the biodroid whispered during a demonstration. "Efficiency has decreased 17% in the past hour alone." Avery observed the Julori technicians, noting their increased activity around certain control panels. Something was wrong with their systems, though they clearly didn't want the human delegation to notice. Later that evening, as the ADC team gathered in their quarters, Kylar confirmed what Avery had suspected. "The bunker's power system is failing," the biodroid reported. "The storm's intensity has exceeded their compensatory algorithms. I estimate critical failure within 12 hours, unless adjustments are made." "Why wouldn't they tell us?" Lieutenant Haynes wondered. Mira's expression darkened. Pride. Admitting their technology can't handle their planet's conditions would be seen as weakness, especially to the ADC's token humans. Avery considered this information. "This could be our opportunity. Kylar, could you develop modifications to their power systems based on what you observed?" Affirmative. Earth's historical experiences with electrical grid management during natural disasters provide several applicable methodologies. However, implementing such changes would require access to their central control systems. Access they are unlikely to grant. "Unless they have no choice," Avery mused. As if on cue, the lights flickered ominously, and a low-level alarm began to sound throughout the bunker. "Power system destabilization accelerating," Kylar noted. "Failure now projected within 6 hours." Avery made his decision. "Mira, find Colonel Velker. Tell him I have urgent information regarding their power systems. Kylar, prepare your modifications. Lieutenant Haynes, Discreetly assess emergency evacuation options, just in case. When Colonel Velker arrived, his normally composed demeanor showed cracks of concern. Accompanying him was a Julori engineer, whose carapace bore the markings of senior technical status. "You requested an urgent meeting. Captain Park?" Velker's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of stress. "Your power distribution system is failing," Avery stated without preamble. "The current storm exceeds your design parameters, and your compensatory algorithms can't adapt quickly enough." The Julori engineer's compound eyes widened in alarm, while Velker's narrowed suspiciously. "That information is classified," Velker said stiffly. "How did you—" "It doesn't matter how we know," Avery interrupted. "What matters is that we can help. Kylar has developed modifications to your system that could prevent catastrophic failure." The engineer chittered something in rapid Julori that the translators didn't catch. Velker responded equally quickly before turning back to Avery. "Chief Engineer Zafik questions whether your biodroid possesses sufficient understanding of Julori power engineering." "Kylar doesn't need to understand every aspect of your technology," Avery explained. "He's identified the algorithmic patterns your systems use to manage power fluctuations. The solution isn't to redesign your technology. It's to optimize how it responds to extreme conditions." As if to emphasize his point, the lights dimmed significantly, and secondary alarms joined the first. "Primary coolant systems failing," announced an automated Julori voice over the bunker's communication system. Velker's compound eyes flicked between Avery and the increasingly panicked engineer. "What do you propose, Captain?" "Let Kylar access your central distribution node. He'll implement algorithmic changes that will stabilize your system long enough to weather this storm." After a moment's hesitation, Velker nodded. "Follow me." The central power distribution node occupied a massive chamber deep within the bunker. Julori technicians scrambled around towering equipment that hummed ominously, electrical discharges occasionally arcing between components. Lieutenant Colonel Korthax was already there, barking orders as systems failed one by one. He turned at their approach, mandibles clicking furiously when he saw Avery and Kylar. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. "This area is restricted to Julori military personnel only." "They are here at my invitation," Velker responded firmly. "Their specialist believes he can stabilize the power grid." "Absurd!" Korthax's translator barely kept pace with his agitated clicking. "We need no alien assistance to manage our own technology." A violent power surge punctuated his statement, causing several nearby consoles to explode in showers of sparks. Julori technicians scrambled for safety, some suffering electrical burns despite their natural resistance. "Your pride endangers everyone in this facility," Avery said, stepping forward. "Let us help before it's too late." For a tense moment, it seemed Korthax would refuse regardless of the consequences. Then, Chief Engineer Zafik intervened, chittering urgently and gesturing to readings that even Avery could tell were approaching critical levels. "Proceed," Korthax finally ground out, stepping aside. Kylar moved immediately to the central control interface, optical sensors rapidly processing the Julori technical displays. "I require direct neural interface access," the biodroid stated. More hesitation, but another system failure expedited the decision. Zafik activated a secondary console, allowing Kylar to extend an interface probe into the Julori systems. What followed was a tense 30 minutes of technical collaboration between species. Kylar's algorithms, based partly on centuries-old Earth techniques for managing power grid surges during natural disasters, were gradually integrated into the Julori systems. Avery provided translation between Kylar's technical explanations and the Julori engineer's understanding, bridging not just language, but conceptual differences. Slowly, the alarms ceased their wailing. Power stabilized, though at reduced capacity. The Julori technicians watched in amazement as their displays shifted from critical red to cautionary amber. "System stabilized," Kylar announced finally. Power efficiency increased by 23% despite storm intensity. Estimated sustainability, 72 hours at current storm levels. The chamber fell silent as the Julori processed what had just occurred. Velkur was the first to speak. It appears we owe you our gratitude. Captain Park, without your intervention, evacuation would have been necessary, a dangerous prospect in current conditions. Avery nodded acknowledgement, but directed attention to Kylar. The credit belongs to my team member. His adaptive algorithms made this possible. Korthax remained silent, his compound eyes unreadable, but his rigid posture spoke volumes about his displeasure at being rescued by aliens, humans, no less. A curious solution, noted Chief Engineer Zafik, examining the modified algorithms. You did not attempt to resist the power fluctuations, but rather created pathways for them to dissipate harmlessly. Simple, yet effective. Sometimes the old solutions are best, Avery replied. Earth's power systems went through similar growing pains centuries ago. As they exited the chamber, Velkur fell into step beside Avery. Your assistance will not be forgotten, Captain. Though I suspect not all my colleagues share my appreciation. Avery glanced at Korthax's retreating form. Lieutenant Colonel Korthax seems committed to certain viewpoints. He represents a significant faction within our military, Velkur acknowledged. They believe interaction with other species weakens us, dilutes our cultural strength. And you disagree? Velkur's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. I believe strength comes in many forms. Today, adaptation proved stronger than resistance. He paused before adding, perhaps humans and Julori share more similarities than differences. The incident marked a turning point in the mission. Though still regarded with suspicion by many Julori, Avery's team had proven their value in a crisis. More importantly, they had demonstrated that human approaches to problems, adaptability over brute force, could complement Julori methodologies. Over the next few days, Kylar worked closely with the Julori engineers, further refining the power systems. Mira established tentative connections with Velkur's intelligence officers, carefully feeling out which factions truly supported the ceasefire. Lieutenant Haynes engaged in more balanced training exercises with Julori security personnel, each side learning from the other's tactics. Avery himself spent considerable time with Colonel Velkur, discussing everything from military strategy to cultural differences. The Julori officer proved surprisingly open-minded, asking thoughtful questions about Earth and human history. Your species achieved spaceflight remarkably quickly, Velkur noted during one such conversation. From first atmospheric flight to interstellar travel in less than 500 years. The Julori required nearly a millennium for the same progression. Necessity drives innovation, Avery replied. Earth's resources were limited, our population large. Space represented both opportunity and survival. Yet you were not unified as a species when you reached the stars, Velkur observed. Our historical records indicate Earth still maintained separate nation-states when first contact occurred. We still do, though the Earth Confederacy coordinates interstellar policy. Our differences are part of our strength, different perspectives approaching the same problems. Velkur's compound eyes studied him with evident curiosity. A chaotic approach, yet effective in its way. The Julori have always valued uniformity of purpose. Their discussion was interrupted by an urgent communication from the embassy site. The storm had finally abated enough for repair teams to assess the damage, and the reports were concerning. Structural integrity compromised in the eastern quadrant, reported a Julori engineer. Evidence suggests deliberate sabotage rather than storm damage. Avery and Velkur exchanged alarmed glances. Sabotage? By whom? Velkur demanded. Unknown, Colonel. The damage pattern indicates someone with knowledge of both the embassy's design and our storm patterns. After the communication ended, Velkur's mandibles clicked rapidly, the Julori equivalent of a troubled sigh. This complicates matters. If elements within my own military are attempting to undermine the ceasefire, or elements within the ADC, Avery noted grimly. This embassy benefits parties on both sides who prefer continued tension. We must investigate discreetly, Velker decided. The embassy repairs provide an opportunity. I suggest a joint inspection team, ostensibly to assess the damage, but actually to gather evidence. The following day, Avery, Velker, and a small team departed for the embassy site. The storm had diminished to occasional electrical discharges, though the sky remained ominously dark. The landscape between bunker and embassy revealed Jeweler 9's harsh beauty, crystalline formations that had been shaped by centuries of electrical activity, their surfaces etched with fractal patterns. At the embassy, the damage was immediately apparent. A section of the eastern wall had collapsed inward, exposing interior chambers to the elements. Equipment lay scattered and damaged, much of it beyond repair. This was no accident, Lieutenant Haynes murmured, examining the debris pattern. Explosive charges, precisely placed. Avery noticed something else, a pattern of scorching that didn't match typical explosive damage. These marks, they're similar to the electrical discharge patterns we saw in the power distribution chamber. Kylar scanned the area, his sensors processing the evidence. Analysis confirms the explosives were triggered by a directed electrical discharge, essentially using the storm itself as a detonator. Technology that can harness the storms, Avery mused, looking at Velker. Like your power systems, but weaponized. The Jewelry officer's compound eyes narrowed. Such technology exists, but its use is restricted to military research divisions. Few would have access. Before they could investigate further, a warning klaxon sounded. Another storm front approaching, faster than predicted. We must return to the bunker, Velker insisted. This facility is no longer safe. As they hurried back to their vehicles, Avery noticed a structural anomaly in the rock face behind the embassy, a seam that didn't match the natural formation. Colonel, what's that opening in the cliff? Velker paused, mandibles clicking in surprise. That is not on any of our surveys. The cliff face should be solid. Despite the approaching storm, they diverted to investigate. The seam proved to be a concealed entrance, a narrow passage leading into darkness. An abandoned mining tunnel, Velker realized, examining ancient jewelry glyphs carved into the rock. This area was excavated centuries ago, before the storms intensified. The perfect covert access point to the embassy, Avery noted. Someone could enter and exit without using the main entrance. Lightning struck nearby, the ground trembling with its impact. We can't investigate now, Velker decided reluctantly. But I will station guards here when we return. They barely reached the vehicles before the storm's advance guard hit. Powerful gusts, carrying charged particles that adhered to exposed surfaces, building up dangerous electrical potential. During the return journey, their lead vehicle suffered a critical malfunction, its propulsion system failing mid-route. As lightning strikes increased around them, the occupants transferred to the remaining vehicles, now dangerously overcrowded. They were still 5 kilometers from the bunker when disaster struck. A massive lightning bolt hit less than 50 meters away, the electrical discharge racing across the conductive ground toward them. Their vehicle's shielding absorbed the initial surge, but failed under the continued assault. Systems failing, reported the jewelry driver, frantically working controls that no longer responded. Emergency protocols offline. The vehicle slewed sideways, momentum carrying it toward a crystalline formation that would shred their hull on impact. Avery lunged forward, pushing the driver aside to access the manual override, a system the jewelry rarely used, preferring their sophisticated automation. Using techniques developed for atmospheric craft in electrical storms on Earth, Avery rerouted power through secondary systems, bypassing the fried main controls. The vehicle responded sluggishly, but enough to avoid the deadly crystals. "We can't reach the bunker in this condition," Avery announced, scanning their surroundings. "We need shelter immediately." Velkur pointed to a dark outcropping. "The old mining complex extends throughout these mountains. If we can reach that ventilation shaft, we might find shelter underground." With the storm intensifying and their vehicle failing, they had no choice. The group abandoned the crippled transport and dashed for the shaft entrance, electrical discharges striking all around them. One Julori soldier fell, his exoskeleton overwhelmed by a proximity strike, but Haynes and another warrior dragged him to safety. The shaft proved to be a tight fit, especially for the larger Julori, but they managed to descend into the relative safety of the abandoned mines. Emergency illumination revealed a vast network of tunnels extending into darkness. "These mines were abandoned 2 centuries ago," Velkur explained, his translator echoing in the confined space. "When the storms began intensifying, surface operations became too dangerous. Kyler's sensors swept the immediate area. I detect residual energy signatures. Someone has been here recently, within the past 48 hours. That revelation put everyone on alert. They proceeded cautiously deeper into the complex, seeking both shelter from the storm and answers to who might be using these forgotten tunnels. What they found exceeded their expectations. In a large chamber that once served as a processing center, someone had established a makeshift laboratory. Equipment, some Julori, some clearly of ADC origin, had been assembled around a central device that hummed with barely contained energy. "A storm modulator," Velkur identified, mandibles clicking in alarm. "Experimental technology designed to influence Jeweler 9's electromagnetic patterns." Avery examined the setup, recognition dawning. "This explains everything. The targeted lightning strikes, the embassy damage, even the power fluctuations at the bunker. Someone's been manipulating the storms." Kylar interfaced with an active console. "The system is currently operational. It appears to be directing the storm currently above us." "Shut it down," Avery ordered immediately. "Inadvisable," the biodroid responded. "Abrupt termination could cause a catastrophic discharge. The storm's energy is currently being channeled through specific patterns." Before they could decide on a course of action, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the tunnels. Everyone took defensive positions, weapons ready. Lieutenant Colonel Korthax emerged from a side passage, accompanied by 3 Julori soldiers and, to Avery's shock, an ADC official he recognized from the diplomatic team. "How disappointing," Korthax remarked upon seeing them. "I had hoped the storm would eliminate the need for direct confrontation." "You're responsible for this?" Velkur's translator barely kept pace with his agitated clicking. "Attacking an ADC embassy? Endangering your own people? This is treason. Korthax!" "Treason!" The lieutenant colonel's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "I am protecting our people from the greatest threat they face: dilution through alien influence." The ADC official, a Moralian named Vexcor, stepped forward. "Certain elements within the coalition share similar concerns. Humanity's rapid advancement threatens established hierarchies. This embassy was never meant to succeed." Avery kept his expression neutral, though internally he processed this confirmation of what Mira had suspected. Elements within both the Julori military and the ADC were actively working to undermine the ceasefire. "The storm modulator," he said, gesturing to the humming device. "That's why you chose this location for the embassy, close enough to the old mines for your equipment to be effective." "Precisely," Korthax confirmed. "The storms provided perfect cover for our activities. Unfortunately, you proved more resilient than anticipated." "The power crisis at the bunker," Velkur realized. "You engineered that too." "A miscalculation," Korthax admitted. "The human's biodroid should not have been able to compensate so effectively. It necessitated more direct action." Avery noticed Kylar discreetly accessing the modulator's controls while attention focused on the confrontation. The biodroid was attempting something, possibly a controlled shutdown, but needed time. "So what happens now?" Avery asked, deliberately drawing Korthax's attention. "You kill us all and claim the storm was responsible?" "A regrettable diplomatic incident," Vexcor confirmed smoothly. "One that will convince both sides that permanent relations are premature." Velkur stepped forward, his posture radiating fury. "You dishonor everything the Julori stand for, Korthax. We are warriors, yes, but we face our enemies directly, not through sabotage and deception. Times change. Colonel, our survival requires adaptation." Korthax's use of the word adaptation seemed deliberately chosen to mock their earlier conversations. Without warning, the modulator's pitch changed, drawing everyone's attention. Kylar had done something to the controls, though what exactly wasn't immediately apparent. "Step away from the device," Korthax ordered, raising his weapon. What happened next occurred with stunning rapidity. The modulator surged, releasing a controlled electromagnetic pulse that temporarily disrupted all electronic devices in the chamber, including weapons, translators, and lighting. In the momentary darkness and confusion, Avery acted. Drawing on combat training specifically designed for low-visibility environments, he targeted Korthax first, the greatest threat. Though physically outmatched in direct confrontation, Avery used the Julori's size against him, targeting vulnerable joint connections in the exoskeleton. Around him, similar struggles erupted as Velkur and the others engaged Korthax's soldiers. The advantage of surprise was temporary. Julori could see better in darkness than humans, but it was enough to create initial chaos. When emergency lighting flickered back on, the situation had changed dramatically. Two of Korthax's soldiers were incapacitated. Vexcor was pinned by Lieutenant Haynes, and Avery had somehow managed to get Korthax into a joint lock that exploited a weakness in Julori physiology, one of the few human combat techniques effective against their superior strength. "Stand down," Velkur ordered the remaining Julori soldier, who wisely complied. With the immediate threat neutralized, attention returned to the storm modulator, which was now emitting an alarming series of tones. "Critical instability detected," Kylar reported. "The device is failing. Destructive cascade imminent." "Can you shut it down?" Avery asked, maintaining his hold on Korthax. "Negative. Systems are locked in an acceleration loop. Estimated time to catastrophic failure, 4 minutes, 17 seconds. Velkur's compound eyes widened. "If that device explodes while connected to the storm system, the electromagnetic backlash would extend throughout the mining complex," Kylar confirmed. "Fatal to all organic life within a 3-kilometer radius. Evacuation impossible in current storm conditions," Haynes added grimly. Avery made a split-second decision. "Kylar, can you redirect the energy? The mines must have had power distribution systems originally." The biodroid's optical sensors flickered as he processed this suggestion. "Affirmative. Original conductive channels exist throughout the complex. Though degraded, if reconfigured, they could potentially disperse the energy harmlessly." "Do it," Avery ordered, releasing Korthax to help. "Lieutenant, secure the prisoners. Colonel Velkur, we'll need your knowledge of Julori mining operations." What followed was a frantic race against time. Kylar interfaced directly with the modulator, attempting to redirect its building energy, while Avery and Velkur rapidly repurposed components from around the laboratory to reconstruct a primitive but functional dispersion network. 3 minutes later, sweat pouring down his face despite the cool underground air, Avery connected the final coupling, ancient Julori conduits, designed to channel energy from the planet's natural electrical fields, now formed a circuit throughout the abandoned complex. "Ready," he called to Kylar. "Initiating energy transfer, now." The modulator's pitch rose to a painful whine as its accumulated power surged into the makeshift network. Lights throughout the mining complex flared brilliantly, ancient systems awakening after centuries of dormancy. The ground vibrated with channeled energy as the storm's power flowed through pathways never designed for such intensity. For a terrifying moment, it seemed their solution would fail. Conduits glowed white-hot. Components smoked and sparked. Then, gradually, the modulator's tone lowered as pressure reduced to manageable levels. Energy successfully dispersed, Kylar announced finally. Catastrophic failure averted. Exhausted, but relieved, Avery leaned against a console, across the chamber. Even the prisoners seemed sobered by their narrow escape. An impressive solution, Velker acknowledged, his translator rendering his tone as something approaching admiration. Few would have thought to repurpose the original mining infrastructure. Sometimes the oldest technology is the most reliable, Avery replied, especially when dealing with fundamental forces like electricity. Their respite was short-lived. The storm above still raged. Communications remained severed, and they were stranded in an abandoned mining complex with prisoners who had committed acts of sabotage against both the ADC and the Julori government. We must return to the bunker, Velker decided. Once there, I will present evidence of this conspiracy to the Julori High Command. And I will contact ADC leadership regarding VexCorp's involvement, Avery added. This goes beyond our immediate mission. It threatens the entire ceasefire agreement. The journey back proved arduous but ultimately successful. Using parts salvaged from the laboratory, Kylar constructed rudimentary protection against the storm's electrical discharges. They emerged from the mines to find the tempest somewhat diminished, though still dangerous. Their arrival at the bunker with prisoners in tow created an immediate sensation. Julori officers gathered in stunned silence as Velker formally charged Korthax with treason, presenting evidence of the conspiracy. Simultaneously, Avery confronted the ADC diplomatic team with VexCorp's betrayal, using Kylar's recordings as proof. In the days that followed, investigations revealed the full extent of the plot. A coalition of hardliners from both the Julori military and the ADC had conspired to sabotage the embassy mission, believing that continued conflict served their respective interests better than peace. Most significantly, data recovered from the storm modulator confirmed something Avery had suspected since arriving. Jeweler 9's notorious electromagnetic storms were not entirely natural. Centuries of Julori technological development had gradually influenced the planet's atmospheric conditions, creating a feedback loop that intensified the tempests beyond their original parameters. This discovery led to renewed scientific cooperation between ADC researchers and Julori engineers, focused on developing methods to stabilize the planet's weather patterns. The abandoned mining complex, with its newly reactivated energy dispersion system, became the centerpiece of this joint initiative. 1 week after the confrontation in the mines, Avery stood with Colonel Velker in the partially rebuilt embassy, watching through reinforced windows as teams of humans and Julori worked side by side on repairs. The High Command has approved a permanent joint research facility, Velker informed him, mandibles clicking with satisfaction. Your demonstration of how older technologies can complement our modern systems has shifted perspectives. And the hardliners? Avery inquired. Still present, but diminished in influence. Korthax's conspiracy exposed a rot within our military hierarchy that needed addressing. Velker's compound eyes studied Avery thoughtfully. You have accomplished something remarkable, Captain Park. When you arrived, many viewed humans as the ADC's weakest member species. Now, they speak of your adaptability with respect. Avery smiled slightly. We're not the strongest, fastest, or most technologically advanced species in the Coalition, but we've survived on Earth by adapting to challenges rather than overwhelming them. A different kind of strength, Velker acknowledged. One the Julori would do well to study. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Lieutenant Mira Solis, whose feathers were sleek and properly groomed for the first time since their arrival, a sign of improved conditions. "Captain, transmission from ADC headquarters," she reported. "Director Safina wishes to speak with you immediately." In the communication center, Director Safina's ancient, silver-flecked visage regarded Avery with what might have been approval. "Captain Park, your reports make for fascinating reading," she began without preamble. "The exposure of conspirators on both sides, the technological breakthrough regarding Jeweler 9 storms, the diplomatic inroads with Colonel Velker's faction, all exceeding mission parameters." "Thank you, Director. The situation evolved in unexpected ways." "Indeed." Her compound eyes narrowed slightly. "The Julori High Command has formally requested that our embassy presence be expanded. Specifically, they've requested that you remain as permanent ADC liaison to their scientific division." Avery blinked in surprise. "That's unexpected." "Is it?" The ancient Arakian's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "You've demonstrated exactly what we hoped, that humans bring unique perspectives valuable to the Coalition. Your species' adaptability complements the more specialized strengths of the other members." Understanding dawned. That was the true purpose of sending a token human to Jeweler 9, not just to establish an embassy, but to showcase human capabilities. Precisely. The Julori respect strength, but they needed to learn that strength comes in many forms. Your success here opens diplomatic doors throughout the sector. As the communication ended, Avery gazed through the viewport at Jeweler 9's storm-racked landscape. Lightning still flashed across the horizon, but now it seemed less threatening, a challenge to be understood rather than merely endured. Perhaps that was humanity's true gift to the stars, not overwhelming power or advanced technology, but the ability to find connections between seemingly incompatible systems, to adapt rather than dominate, to turn obstacles into opportunities. The token human experiment had succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. And somewhere in the violent skies above, the first tendrils of order were beginning to emerge from chaos, much like humanity's own journey to the stars.